I should have seen it coming. When Global Core Industries took over Metatron Labs 6 months ago, the red flags were everywhere. Budget cuts, rushed timelines, executives who smiled too much and listened too little. But after 16 years of building my reputation as the head of biosafety, part of me stubbornly clung to the belief that integrity still had a place here. My name is Cassandra Moore. I'm 51 years old, and until last Friday, Metatron Labs was my entire professional world. I lived and breathed our protocols, trained dozens of researchers, and spent countless late nights ensuring not a single sample left our lab without passing rigorous checks. I wasn't flashy. I didn't network at corporate dinners or play golf with the higher-ups. I let my work speak for me. Apparently, that was my first mistake. It started during a quarterly review, one of those sterile conference rooms where the chairs are too stiff and the air feels just a little too cold. Dr. Wayne Cartwright, the shiny new VP of Operations, slid a folder across the table toward me with a practiced frown. "Cassandra, we have concerns regarding your department's oversight on the GenVax trial." I blinked. Concerns? The GenVax project, an experimental vaccine, had been my team's crown jewel, and we had hit every milestone, even under impossible deadlines. "Multiple procedural deviations," he said, flipping through pages with dramatic flair. "Missed documentation, expired reagent usage, chain of custody gaps." I sat there stunned. None of it made sense. We had double-checked everything. Hell, I had double-checked everything. "This isn't just about paperwork," he continued. "The NIH has frozen the $7.5 million grant tied to GenVax. Investors are furious. Frankly, someone has to be held accountable." And just like that, 16 years of flawless work evaporated under a few typed paragraphs and a convenient scapegoat. They painted me as negligent. A once respected leader now branded careless. Incompetent even. I should have fought back right. There, screamed, demanded a real audit. But looking around the room, at the HR rep who couldn't meet my eyes, at the Global Core lawyer tapping his pen with impatience, I understood. This wasn't a conversation. It was an execution. Cartwright leaned back in his chair, smiling like he'd already moved on to the next item on his agenda. "This is final, Cassandra. It's best for all involved if you accept the severance package. Quietly, and move on." I stood, gathering what little dignity I had left. "You're right about one thing," I said, voice steady even as my hands shook. "Someone will be held accountable. Just not today." No one stopped me as I walked out of that room. No goodbye party. No thank you for nearly 2 decades of service. Just a cardboard box, a locked-out badge, and the slow, burning realization that when corporate greed needs a fall guy, it doesn't matter how many years you gave them. It only matters how fast. They can erase your name from the building, but what they didn't know, what they never even thought to check, was that I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I didn't storm out that day. No dramatic speeches, no slammed doors. Just a quiet walk through the Metatron lobby one last time, my heels echoing on the polished floors. If they thought humiliating me publicly would break me, they had underestimated the woman they spent 16 years ignoring. The truth was, I had been preparing for this, not consciously at first, but somewhere deep down I had known. Ever since the Global Core acquisition, something had shifted. The emphasis on speed over safety, the unspoken pressure to adjust trial data to fit marketing narratives, the subtle changes in leadership memos, less about integrity, more about deliverables. It was all too familiar to ignore. 18 months ago, when the first corners were cut, I started keeping records. At first, it was just for my own sanity. Notes on lab meetings where safety protocols were dismissed as recommendations. Emails from supervisors hinting that positive outcomes would help future funding. Copies of lab results before and after review, numbers that had magically improved overnight. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival, tucked inside an old leather-bound journal, I had logged everything: dates, times, names, discrepancies, compliance violations, and every veiled threat disguised as a suggestion. I stored backups too, flash drives hidden in plain sight among family vacation photos, encrypted cloud folders labeled with random project codes. Because if Metatron ever decided to make me a scapegoat, I wasn't going down alone. In the days after my firing, I said nothing publicly. I posted no cryptic status updates. I didn't warn my colleagues. I simply disappeared from their radar, while quietly sorting through a mountain of damning evidence. I spent late nights at my kitchen table, combing through old meeting transcripts, cross-referencing chemical batch logs, highlighting altered timestamps on test submissions. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was gathering the truth, piece by meticulous piece. The more I dug, the angrier I became. But it was a clean, cold anger. The kind that sharpens your focus instead of clouding. Because I realized this wasn't just about me. Patients' lives could have been endangered. Entire trial outcomes compromised for the sake of quarterly reports. And while they thought silencing me would erase the risk, all they had done was light a fuse. There was a moment, sitting there with a mug of cold coffee and pages of fraudulent data spread around me, when I understood the full weight of what I was holding. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a blueprint of systemic corruption, one that could bring a billion-dollar empire to its knees if the right people saw it. I closed my laptop slowly, heart steady. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight their dirty games, in their dirty arena. I was going to expose them the one way they never expected, quietly, surgically, and with a precision they had taught me to master, and this time, I was writing the report. I didn't rush it. Timing mattered. Precision mattered. The morning I submitted the complaints, San Diego was cloaked in that heavy marine layer that made the skyline look like it had been erased overnight. Fitting, I thought. Metatron Labs, once the crown jewel of biomedical. Innovation was about to vanish under the weight of its own arrogance. I sent 2 separate detailed packages, one to the National Biomedical Oversight Commission, the other to OSHA. Each included a meticulous breakdown of altered chemical reports, skipped safety protocols, and falsified trial data. Every page time-stamped, cross-referenced, and backed by secure metadata. There were no anonymous tips this time. I signed my full name. Cassandra Moore, former head of biocontainment compliance. 15 years of spotless audits and 0 incidents under my watch. Let them try to spin that. Then I waited, quietly, calmly. It took 48 hours. The first ripple came in the form of an email leak. Somehow, and I had a few guesses how, an internal memo from Global Core's executive team acknowledging potential compliance concerns made its way to a local reporter. By the end of the week, the San Diego Tribune ran the headline across their front page: Metatron Labs under investigation for data integrity violations. By Monday, it wasn't just local news anymore. Science Weekly, Medical Ethics Journal, even the Wall Street Journal picked it up. Terms like reckless endangerment, regulatory breach, and patient risk exposure were everywhere. Global Core's PR team scrambled, issuing tight, lawyer-sanitized statements about conducting internal reviews and reaffirming their commitment to transparency. It was laughable. Their entire model had been built on cutting corners to win market share before real biotech firms could catch up. And now, every dirty shortcut was being dragged into the light. Inside Metatron, panic set in. Several senior managers resigned to pursue other opportunities. Translation. They ran before subpoenas hit their desks. Lab technicians who once side-eyed me in hallways were now posting cryptic messages about valuing scientific integrity on LinkedIn. Cowards. But I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. Watching them scramble was just sad. They had sold their credibility for quarterly bonuses and empty titles. They had sacrificed the soul of real science to climb a corporate ladder built on quicksand. The best part? Every audit team that stepped into Metatron's glass doors was armed with my evidence. They weren't guessing. They weren't looking for mistakes. They had roadmaps to every violation, every breach, every lie. Sitting by the window of my small home office, sipping coffee that actually tasted sweet for once, I watched the morning news scroll by. Investigations were expanding. NIH was reviewing every funding proposal linked to Metatron for the past 5 years. Congressional panels were already drafting inquiries into Global Core's acquisition practices. And me? I didn't say a word publicly. No interviews, no anonymous leaks, no grandstanding. Because sometimes real justice doesn't need noise. It just needs the undeniable, quiet weight of truth. The email arrived 3 days after the first televised hearings. Subject line: from one guardian to another. I blinked twice, rereading the sender's name. Dr. Sophia Hahn, the woman who had founded Metatron Labs 3 decades ago, back when it was just an idea scribbled on a napkin and a single rented lab bench. She had retired years before Global Core's takeover, stepping away with quiet dignity when it became clear the soul of the company was slipping away. I clicked open the message with hands that trembled just slightly. "Cassandra," it began, "I've been following what's happening. You did what I should have done long ago. If you're willing, I'd like to meet." I don't remember breathing for a few seconds. Then, without hesitation, I typed back, "Name?" The time and place. We met in a small, no-frills coffee shop tucked between a library and a hardware store. She looked older than the photos I remembered, her once black hair now streaked with silver. But her eyes still had that sharp, unflinching clarity I'd admired from afar. "Cassandra," she said, standing to greet me, her grip surprisingly firm. "You didn't just pull off a coup, you started a reckoning." I shook my head, modest. "I just told the truth." "You protected the science," she corrected gently. "The real Metatron. The one they thought they could bury under marketing slogans and quarterly earnings reports." We talked for hours, over bitter coffee and the occasional clink of ceramic mugs. Sophia laid out what she'd been working on behind the scenes: a coalition of former Metatron scientists, ethics experts, and legal advisors. People who had seen the decay creeping in but hadn't known how to fight it. Until now. She asked if I'd be willing to join forces, not for revenge, but for full exposure. Without hesitation, I agreed. Together, we launched a private audit, pulling public records, FDA filings, internal grant applications. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. It wasn't just safety protocols that had been compromised. The data Metatron submitted to the FDA, the clinical trial results used to push an experimental vaccine into Phase 2 approvals, had been altered. Critical adverse event reports had been minimized. Dosage inconsistencies glossed over. Entire patient responses standardized to make the results look cleaner, safer, more profitable. We weren't just looking at internal malpractice anymore. We were staring down federal fraud, criminal charges, a scandal big enough to rock, not just Global Core, but the entire biomedical sector. Sophia looked across the scattered folders and flash drives between us one evening and said quietly, "They thought they could get away with it because they thought no one would care enough to..." I met her gaze and answered, steady and certain, "They were wrong." The next day, armed with irrefutable documentation, we filed a joint complaint with the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. This time, not just to right a wrong, but to burn the entire rotten foundation to the ground and rebuild something better. The fallout was faster and more brutal than anyone expected. Within weeks of the FDA launching their criminal probe, Global Core Industries started hemorrhaging executives. One by one, The people who had treated lives like line items on a budget spreadsheet were either fired or resigned to pursue other opportunities, a phrase so hollow it practically echoed. The CEO overseeing the Metatron acquisition was among the first to go, his name wiped from every company announcement like he had never existed. I watched the headlines unfold from the worn leather armchair in my living room, a cup of black coffee cooling in my hands. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. This wasn't revenge. This was what accountability looked like when someone finally stayed standing long enough to demand it. My phone buzzed one quiet Thursday afternoon as I was organizing files for the ethics board hearing. The email subject read simply, "Opportunity to lead, UC Berkeley." I almost didn't open it. Part of me was still too used to being overlooked, too conditioned to expect only doors slamming shut. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a formal invitation from the University of California, Berkeley, one of the most respected research institutions in the country. They had been following the Metatron case closely. Their board of research integrity was seeking a new division. Head, someone with proven resilience, someone who wouldn't flinch when integrity was on the line. Someone who, bluntly, had already weathered the worst and chosen principle over politics. They wanted me. Not in spite of what had happened, but because of it. The offer laid it all out. A senior leadership role. Full authority to design and oversee ethics protocols across all biomedical research divisions. A team built from scratch. Funding for innovation initiatives. Most importantly, absolute autonomy to push back when, not if, the pressures of funding and prestige tempted people to cut corners. As I sat there rereading the letter, a slow, incredulous smile crept across my face. 2 years ago, I had been publicly scapegoated for refusing to bend the rules. Now, I was being asked to teach a new generation how not to. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the enormity of the opportunity. This wasn't just a new job. It was a chance to rebuild trust in a system that desperately needed it. I typed my reply without hesitation. "Dear Dr. Patel, thank you for the opportunity. I would be honored to accept." When I hit send, it felt like something inside me, something heavy and battered, finally exhaled. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had set the stage for the most important work of my life. 6 months. After I signed the offer letter with UC Berkeley, the news finally broke in full force. Global Core Industries, the same corporate giant that had once thought itself untouchable, was slapped with a staggering $450 million fine for research misconduct, ethical violations, and falsification of biomedical data. It made national headlines. No amount of PR spin could soften it. No amount of carefully worded apologies could erase the fact that they had gambled with public trust and lost. Former executives lined up behind defense attorneys, their mugshots circulating alongside once flattering corporate bios. The CEO, who had smiled and shaken my hand at company banquets, was now facing federal criminal charges. Justice, slow, methodical, and heavy, had finally caught up. And me? I had no need to gloat. Because I was too busy building something better. Under the banner of UC Berkeley, I became a founding voice in the Research with Honor campaign, a national movement aimed at restoring transparency, accountability, and ethical rigor in biomedical research. I traveled across the country speaking to institutions, regulatory boards, and young scientists just starting out, telling them bluntly, doing the right thing won't always be easy. Sometimes it will cost you everything. But if you don't protect the integrity of your work, you lose far more than a job. You lose the future. People listened. Not because I shouted the loudest, but because I had lived it. At every keynote, every ethics workshop, every strategy session, I carried the quiet, unshakable conviction that had gotten me through those darkest days at Metatron. Not bitterness, not vengeance, just the truth. Sharp as a scalpel, steady as a heartbeat. And somehow, without fanfare, without theatrics, the world had shifted. One quiet, stubborn woman against a giant. And this time, the giant had fallen. I stood at the podium, the last slide behind me simply reading, "Honor over haste." The auditorium was silent for a beat before I spoke, letting the weight of the journey settle over the room. "One day," I began, steady and sure, "you'll find yourself at a crossroads between what's easy and what's right. Choose right, especially when it costs you. Because reputations crumble, fortunes fade, but integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away." As I finished, the applause rose. Not explosive, but genuine, grounded, and real. And as I stepped down from the stage, I knew this was the true victory, not crushing the ones who had wronged me, but becoming someone they could never have broken in the first place. Share your feelings below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next videos.